Okay, Theodora, you, you admit you created a question about artificial intelligence a very long time ago. I'm so overdue in getting back to you. So, with apologies for the delay, I can explain it. But in the meantime, let's talk. Thank you to Sergio, for continuing to provide some funding for us. Much appreciated. Uh, and let's go straight to Theodora's question of ancient times. You know, this question about artificial intelligence, I honestly didn't have any particular feelings about it. And most of what I'm going to talk about today is probably just, in one sense, feelings about it. I don't use it. I haven't studied pictures. I've seen a few that are obviously generated by computers. I'm talking about some portrait heads and things like that. Um, and way back in the old days, I even remember when they first came out with something that they would call a Leonardo da Vinci, leftward diagonal markings to make photographic reproductions. You'd make it look like a Leonardo. So that version of artificial intelligence is probably the nearest thing I have to it, except for certain other experiences you've all shared at the movies and so on. So we'll talk about this stuff, but let's look at the question. And nearly a Merry Christmas to you all. I managed to get myself a red cup today. Theodora says, I would love to hear your opinion on this AI and how some artists use stolen data through this to create their art. This technology can be good in some fields to help humanity, but I do not get the creative field. I'm a teacher, and I introduce you to my students because you're one of those rare people who talks about the process more than just the end result. I actually forgot that was in there, so I wasn't trying to beat my own, whatever, blow my own horn. Some AI artists say that this technology has a process, but no. By the way, AI is under heavy lawsuits. Good, Theodora. And I'll read you another question. It came in from someone else, and it might have been you, Theodora, but I think it was somebody else. And I feel bad that I managed to take the question down and not note the individual's name who brought it. But I'll read you that question a little bit later. I'm going to go through just some points here. This is kind of going to be what I usually do. You know, it's a little bit of wandering, a little bit theoretical. We've all had experiences with technology that either inform or in some ways make you doubt the work in front of you. One time, not so long ago, there was a show at the Guild, and one of the presumptions at the Guild, of course, at the Guild of Boston Artists in Boston, where I was the president for some years. But there was a show in which one of the individuals came in with a clearly traced photograph, and they had just sort of filled in some colors around the photograph. So that's in that class of something, not precisely AI, but it's that technology thing that where we begin to just, I don't know if it's quick and dirty sort of stuff. I mean, that a lot of that, the use of photography even comes out of the need for quick turnover for illustrations, for example. And we're talking about some good illustrators like Norman Rockwell or Maxfield Parrish. But I've asked around, though. Asked some of my students. I asked my wife, who writes, and sort of did a poll, if you want to put it that way. These are those days, right? At least in this country, with elections, polling, right? So you put a question out there. So I asked AI, what's the first thing you think of? And of course, the response is robots. And the second one, but then I wanted an opinion. Good, bad, or ugly was my question. And the answer that I thought was more or less definitive was good for some things, bad for others, and absolutely ugly for the creative process. So make of that what you will. I didn't ask for details in particular. So, but there was a general sort of sense of rejection among the people I was working with, all of whom are hands-on, either writers or, in fact, in my wife's case, her writing, she has, until very recently, has written longhand. But I've never been do I think that we shouldn't have typewriters? Shouldn't people have to write their term papers longhand? I've never been that guy. I can't pretend. I mean, every aspect of our life has a technology. I'm talking about we use brushes. We use grinders to grind paint. I mean, one way or the other, even the crudest version of it is still a tool. And if you think of artificial intelligence as being a tool, then perhaps there's something to it, right? And that's and my general feeling about all this stuff is there's a yes and a no thing here. And I'm not trying to define it or be your answer man as much as to do something I think is most important in our world, and that is to keep a conversation going, talking about it in various ways. And so it's not a question of taking sides or being shilly-shallying. It's a question of trying to grasp, the thing with its this versus that content or values. I was talking to a friend, Paul Mirsky, in the state of New Hampshire, who's an architect, and I asked him if he used CAD programming, and he got really irritated with me. He's a guy my age, roughly, a little older, and he said, and he just talked about how important it was to make lines with your fingers, with your hands, and in architecture, and so I don't, I wish I could. I wish I had really followed up. I wish I could have him sitting here right now. That's not possible. But that wasn't that an interesting response, though, and you see things like what do you call those musical instruments that you just plug anything in and it'll play a tune for you, and then you can play your instrument with that tune, or what are those machines called? I've forgotten. I don't know well anyway, and I'm a little tired, so I'm not going to drag it up very easily. But I've always found those just a little irritating. Sometimes you'll see that in a modern church where somebody's playing canned music, and these are all in the class of something like AI, just the recording versus a human performance. Do I want to throw it out, say don't use it? No, and we've always done a little bit of both. I mean, tools are tools, and I don't think AI is anything in one sense except a tool. Some people would say a tool of the devil. Yeah, probably my mom. But one of the interesting questions that comes up for me is, the sergeant made a statement at one point. He said, you really need to be good. You have to have made yourself into a really well-disciplined painter so that stuff is all an automatic pilot while your mind is dealing with more important things. And that, so this whole idea of elevating your mental capacity or your spiritual capacity by somehow or other getting those other things onto some other plane, those are just the things we're using. But so isn't there kind of an interesting question whether or not there's some benefit? Is it possible for us to use some versions of artificial intelligence to make ourselves more powerful at expressing, or more capable of focusing on something about expression? One thing I have found, and I'm going to talk about impressionism in relation to this, not very far, well, toward the end of it probably, but and I'm hoping this doesn't take all day to do. I actually made a list of points, only because I, don't have a general approach to this at all. So I made a series of points, and I mean to get back to the question of impressionism as it relates. Can that be done, and to what extent is that a useful, et cetera, kind of a thing? One of the things that comes out of the idea of a robot doing something is the idea of building in a formula. You have to inform it to do certain things at certain times and all that sort of thing. Now, I know that some AI is supposed to be self-educational, so it can actually come up with different ideas and even variations beyond what you may have programmed in, if you also have programmed in that capacity to self-educate on a computer's. By the way, notice how that all just follows us. That's where we're spending our whole life self-educating, becoming better and better and better and better. And that's significantly what it means to be human, to do that. Why would we want to pass that off to to a computer, to and sort of almost suggests a lack of faith in ourselves. But that's just an interesting side point. What I was going to say about the formula idea, though, is like through the Greeks, the golden mean. There are people, and I've talked about this before, who want a formula for composition, and the golden mean is one of those devices that people use, thinking it will. Now, I say again, spitball them over the home plate of life, but that will actually help them to bypass or build in some high level of quality. But the formulaic, I think, inherently is problematical. One of the the pastiche world. I mean, a lot of people will just say, "Oh, they'll turn Sargent into a formula, and then they'll start producing these little things," or they'll turn the Hudson River School into a formula, and then start. But one of the differences I point out from time to time is that between Rubens and Rembrandt, there's a sense that Rembrandt is this constantly evolving. I mean, I literally can watch him, much like Degas, you can watch him evolve through his life. And Rubens seems to be living in this place that he's created as if it were machined in, And by the way, he was running a factory, so production, and big pictures, huge pictures and stuff. There was something going on there that's sort of inevitable, but it took something away. You wonder if it did, right? Let me just look actually at a Rubens and so there's a Rubens, and when somebody asked Degas if he had found his way, if he had arrived when he knew he had arrived or something, he said, "Madam, in my day, one did not arrive," and which is that whole thing about like constantly evolving yourself, evolving your computer, shall we say, your intelligence. And but there's something that goes on, and there's no doubt that Rubens gets better over time, but he's got something going here that he needs to have going so that he can have 25 guys or whatever working on his pictures. So I'm calling that a formula. And it seems to me that, for my money at least, it takes something away. It's fine for decorating a wall and all that sort of thing, and for efficiencies, which seems to be a pretty big issue with relation to the machine, and the assistance of the machine. But there are efficiencies. But when you look at Rembrandt, I wonder if I would trade any of these Rembrandts for the efficiency of a Rubens, for the one that just goes on forever, the Rubens, that is just Rubens, and for instance, a Rembrandt, where you see the mind of a Rembrandt shifting, where you see the development of the poetic, technological, and other kinds of expression. These are the kind of the, sort of the, they put me in the question, one of the questions of why would you do robotics except for efficiency type purposes, but if you then have to build in something where there's sort of everything has to be, there's a sort of, we set this standard of quality. By the way, all painters set a standard of quality, but we set the standard of even the look, and it just goes on forever. I think of sometimes of Kincaid that way, the American, Christmas card maker. But let's just keep moving through this. I have just way too many things and I want to say them all so that you can get back to me. You can say things. I don't want to. I always have been aware that there are uses for computers in different ways. I recommend it when I do composition classes with people. I recommend that people take their photograph for efficiency in a short composition class. Take a photograph of the sketch they just did and then change it, and take it with Photoshop and then change it on the computer, move stuff around and try things. So it gives you this opportunity to do trial and error. So there are aspects of it that I'm going to simply say I think really make something good out of it. Let me just keep moving. These are just somewhat random. Computer-generated movies and ads, I find there's a curious shallowness to them. I find them off-putting. I've never, ever liked, even, Lord of the Rings or whatever, when they start generating this stuff, for some reason or other, there's something about it that just loses me. And, and I don't know what it is. I don't know if we need to have, something that's less tricky. I don't know. I just really don't know why it does that to me. But you see ads today that just really insult my intelligence or your intelligence, whoever's watching them. And they are very evidently, something is, they've been told, sort of what to generate, and they're generating these ads. And so again, you're saving money, but you might be insulting your audience. Is that really a good thing? Degas talks about falseness, as if that was a good thing. And I'm not going to take anything away from you, because Degas' idea, it's all lies. Art is artifice, he said. It's all lies with the accent of truth. And if you're taking that position, there is something that goes on. We just watched a couple nights ago, or last night, the Black Narcissus, the movie. And but there's a discussion afterwards in this Criterion production that about how the movie was made. That was all this whole drama of landscape, of dramatic landscapes, mountains and cliffs dropping off, and all this sort of stuff was generated in a studio with artists and other people involved in a studio in Hollywood or wherever. And there was an inevitable falseness to it, but the falseness was they were able to use this to generate poetic content. So, what am I going to tell them not to be doing that? Oh, why didn't they go to the real place and shoot real stuff? I'm not convinced that that's a thing. When you're trying to communicate there may be efficiencies. There may be, I don't mean efficiencies in the terms of time, but I mean about getting your point made. There may be things you can do to make the point more effectively. And it is an art of communication, ours, in one sense. One of the things I really care about in painting, and I would say it in the same way, in these days, we're watching people like Caitlin Clark or any phenomenon, who was the golfer just a few years ago. When I was young, it was Jack Nicklaus or somebody like that. And in middle age, I remember watching Larry Bird. These guys, these phenomena. There's something about their performance and what they're doing with their hands, and how we can well relate to all the stuff they're doing. We can almost picture ourselves going through their work ethic, and studying hard, working hard. And so there's all kinds of information that's coming through to us besides the win at the end of the day. And so it's not just so I'd say ours is an illustration, it's a communication, telling a story, expressing a mood and all that sort of thing. But there's so much more, the marks on the canvas, the paint marks indicate something of the human mind. And we're in the communication between us as an audience and the artist is so much more profound, that there's so much more to it. Why do we want to bypass ourselves? So there's that. The question comes up. You brought the question up, or I think it was you, about theft, plagiarism, human. But we borrow from each other all through time. So I don't think about that as much of a thing until you start taking away whole passages and borrow some guy's portrait and stick it into your painting. But painters have always used other people's paintings, their ideas of design. We always build on each other. There's no question that's true. But plagiarism is a whole different story, when you're actually, and in the written arts, that's apparently really a serious problem, or we've seen some evidence of it. And I've heard about it in music as well. So it's undoubtedly happening in the painting world. But back to that question, though, of the human contact and all that sort of stuff, one of Gamel's points was how the institutionalization, which is another version, in my view, of what AI is an art institution, a teaching school. All of a sudden, you have all these guys just teaching this body of fact data. And they aren't necessarily even good painters. I've not run into a number of schools where they aren't even particularly good painters who are doing the teaching of these first level students. And so you're missing. Gamble would talk about the importance of face-to-face contact and the far greater depth of information that's coming even by osmosis. Really, you're just picking stuff up sort of unknowingly, like a child, you know, my son's child there, it's just wild watching him just pick up data and become, he just takes it in from everywhere, and he's taking every kind, you can tell he's taking every kind of information in. Just really fascinating stuff. So, so, so there's a dehumanization or if you want to call it that, of the art in the institutions, but there's also a depersonalization. And, so, and with that comes this loss of richness, a loss of depth. Painting becomes an institution. It becomes a matter of this data. Now you're going to take it and hopefully do something with it, but the application into an algorithm or whatever it is of AI, this sheer data thing isn't a different. If you want to say that, it's a different class. It's just raw facts, and so on the other hand, if you're saying I'm just using this to sort out a compositional concept. I'm trying this. I'm using this medium, this technology. But one of the things I didn't like to hear, I don't know if it was you. I think it wasn't you, Theodora. Maybe I should bring the other question in here pretty soon. In fact, let me just do it now. Let me finish this discussion. I actually have a point or two to make here. I was observing in Ford or Fortune magazine a bunch of years ago, back around the end of 1999, they came out with a magazine on the careers to be in, and I think that's what it was. It may not have been the word careers, but to be in the 2000s. And they had listed painting. And my recollection is, and I've mentioned it to you before, but my recollection is that they are talking about it because of its uniqueness and the presence of the human involved in it. So obviously they're talking pre-robotic painting, you might call low-tech stuff. So part of the appreciation is just that human connection. You can see the fingerprints, you can see the brush marks. There's only one like it. It's not being reproduced by the thousands, even though it could be and used as reproduction, like on cards or something like that. But that human thing, that human fingerprint, the brush marks, all that stuff, they valued that. They're saying there's a unique value in that. So, how might I handle that? Is that not so, right? Let me go to that second question, if I can get there quickly here. What are your thoughts on AI, Midjourney? And I don't know what Midjourney means. Midjourney of AI? I don't know. Is it helpful? Can it be used for improving compositional skills? And I've already said I do recommend people use aspects of it, but I don't know how. See, you may know AI better than I, and I'm not going to be that guy who tells you that you should use AI. And in fact, the way you're talking in a minute here, I'd say probably not. And working from one's imagination. I've used it and in fact found it extremely helpful for getting out ideas that are in my head, much like a sketchbook, but just digital. Now, if you have an idea in your head and you can say something to a computer or scribble something at it and have it project something, this might be a form of brainstorming, which I wouldn't argue is plausible and reasonable. And it's much like that, you can change a little mark on something, trial and error, instead of having to draw this whole thing all over again, just to change one little passage. And there are other ways. Painters in the past, like Ang, used tracing paper, layovers and things like that, so they didn't have to do constant review, whole copies, or have their students do whole copies, even though they did that anyway also at other times. Helpful to getting out ideas that are in my head, much like a sketchbook, but just digital. I use a program called Wacom with Clips Studio Paint. I can put in what I imagine and it gives me a rough composition, and I've yellowed that there. It gives me a rough composition. So are you not putting in a composition idea and then having it do something to you, that's sort of forming it up? I don't like that idea, frankly. I don't like it to tell me. On the other hand, all compositions come from somewhere, even in your imagination. You've seen it probably in a picture somewhere for the most part. And so I'm not going to tell you that isn't slightly plausible, but I would prefer personally not to do. I'd rather pre-see it in my own mind before I bring any kind of, have it tell me, how about this idea? How about that idea? Who is that? But nevertheless, I'm never going to be the guy that's going to trash it until it becomes something inhuman, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But so that I can work from almost like a template. I think it's better, much better than working from a photograph, which I certainly agree. A lot of this stuff is photographic based, and I'm concerned that what happens with AI, what most people will do with it, is it'll just reinforce the photographic, right? As if it was already, by the time we got to Jerome, the photographic bureau, the photographic was beginning to dominate everything, and probably thanks to the photograph. But there's also the longer tendency of trying to get more and more and more realistic, more like, your drawing, going from, getting all the way back from pre-Titian, like Giotto, going through Titian, and you can see all his sort of struggles to make it more like, and, going through Rubens and getting, say, Van Dyck becoming sort of clearly more like, not that Rubens couldn't do that necessarily, but anyway, I've almost completely abandoned photography and desire to work from life or my imagination. So that's interesting. I hope that everybody will abandon photography. It has its uses. I don't know that I've ever seen any evidence that Sargent used it for anything, although I don't know that for sure. But I do see that Jerome has used it, Degas used it. I have a feeling they don't use it like you will use it if you come out of an art school today, where drawing isn't even taught anymore. In most places I run into. I'm talking about the old ones, the old schools. The new ateliers obviously are trying to teach drawing. AI has helped me move past photographic references and put down digital sketching. And putting down digital sketching has been very eye-opening and has actually catapulted my vision of where I want to go and be in the future. Now I can't fault that if there's something like that happening where you're finding yourself being enabled. I'd love to hear more about, or even see images about how that's worked out for you. But I just wanted to talk about a couple other points and then get out of here. But just for 2 seconds, actually, back to the tools idea. Everybody's constantly using tools, and I just wanted to mention, I really thought it was amusing when I was living in the town of Newtonville outside Boston, and we were in this area that held these Victorian homes, what they call the painted ladies. And every single one of them had a porch whose scroll work and pattern, they all had beautiful designs all around the porch. But each one of them was different. I don't think I saw two the same. I mean, it's just a really wonderful scroll work around the railings and arching up into the upper portion of the porch. And I talked to somebody about a builder about what was going on there. Why were they suddenly doing this? And he said because the electric scroll saw had suddenly, and other electric tools had come into being, and they suddenly had more time on their hands. Now, how would I ever fault that? I mean, it's really beautiful stuff. Why would I ever fault technology on that level? But are we talking about the same thing? So you guys who are really involved in and have read about AI, I thought for a second to pop up, maybe I could even do it, pop up on the screen here, maybe this is it, an article. Here we go. What is artificial intelligence? I've never done that before, actually, I don't think, with you guys. But here's this whole thing about it, and this is a standardization organization, international standardization or something. What is artificial intelligence? And they go through all this stuff. What's AI? Decoding the AI, meaning how does AI work, and blah blah, and so on. But I'm just mentioning it. But I was interested in that. So you talked about that photography as an aid, all that stuff. One of the things, talking about Impressionism for a second, one of the things about Impressionism is that, by very definition, it is you taking a slice of nature, you with your own eyes and hands, taking a slice of nature and on canvas, showing what it is that excites you, really bringing home the truth of that moment, and so effectively that somebody would say, "Wish I was there," or whatever, But in an attempt to communicate your love, your experience. Now, as I said before, that one-to-one thing, I remember, as I said to you before, one of our things is to paint relationally, is to study with your eyes. And Degas, of course, is the guy who says, doesn't he know it's an art of relations? But to study things with your eyes and find out how they interplay and all that sort of thing with your eyes. And so your whole being is being informed, slowly informed, and then composing, shall we say, this into well, or should I even say discovering a composition, but coming to terms with the source of beauty and all those sorts of things. I just can't imagine why you would want to have a computer in your hands, why you'd want to have photographs of any kind in your hands. What else would you do, though, to get into a computer? You'd probably have to photograph it. The photograph is such a piece of deception and shallowness. It's a very weak reproduction compared to your own eyes. And that's true of portraiture as well. I mean, portraitures, we've really lost badly through, I don't care who you are, if you're using photography, it's a tough loss. I can't imagine wanting to be there, and I don't do it actually. My paintings are all done from life, my portraits. But one of the things I was saying is I remember at one point I was standing there trying to see these color relations, and all of a sudden I saw the beauty of color, of a field of multiple colors, and how they dance to each other. And you need to have that experience. Why do you want to take that away from yourself? Just because of the end result? So at the very least, a student of painting wants to be fully imbued with that world that happens underlying everything when you stand before nature with your own eyes and have to make it with your own hands. That all that stuff that you're doing, you're turning yourself into. If you haven't turned yourself into this AI, so in fact, if it isn't human intelligence, leads artificial intelligence, I don't know what we wind up with. This, again, remember, this is just these come into my mind. I don't stand here as any kind of an expert, and I'd love to have a larger conversation with somebody who is, or somebody who, who can narrow down the discussion into something more, I should say, less wandering. Make a point. This is, well, you're really, that's not what AI is. AI is really like this. Well, I could use that. Yeah, I'm not. Even though I read that article on AI there, but I'm commenting to myself, thinking to myself about the pseudo impressionists. That you can make pseudo marks, so your drawing looks like a Leonardo. Your photograph looks like it was drawn the way Leonardo, with the marks of Leonardo. Well, broken color is one of those things. You can make a computer do broken color, and all sorts of mannerisms. You can load them into a computer, but you can't replace that meeting of the human mind. And my biggest takeaway about all this stuff is that we are communicators of lots of stuff with our family, with our friends, with our audience. The time we've spent before nature is what we're sharing with them. They don't have time, shall we say. And we have that opportunity to stand before nature and uncover its beauties, really become conversant with the beauties of nature. And if you want to say nature's creator, so we're getting into the mind of God and all this sort of stuff. And I'm just saying there's this richness that I don't know how you could even talk about wanting to be separated from that, just to have a, quote, impressionistic looking result. Why wouldn't you want to be imbued and saturated and become the vehicle, right? Historically, we're supposed to be the vehicle for the arts, right? You're a servant of the arts. But what kind of a servant are you if it's all reliance on photography and AI and all that sort of stuff? So it's just interesting questions. And maybe the final one is the final point might be that question of the love factor and all this sort of thing. Can you incorporate the love factor into a computer? And is the computer going to be expressing its love of something? Or maybe you would say that if you like this stuff, you could say, I can generate that. I can use AI, but I can still generate that love response, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if that's true, that's all good. The the one thought that comes to mind whenever I think of AI, I always think of intelligence, meaning all this stuff above your neck. And that's one of the differences I like to point out again between Rubens and Rembrandt. There is that thing that happens in Rubens, which is I would say in some sense, the intellectualization or the isolation, the objectification of the form into something that can just be plugged in here and plugged in there and plugged, and all the, yeah. And the difference between that is really actually, to my mind at least, is in the heart of a Rembrandt, and which we respond to, right? Don't we? I don't know how you can look at a Rembrandt portrait and not respond as from the heart. But a Rubens, I don't make associations with the heart. I don't care what he paints. I don't think he paints his wife, and I don't feel anything, so to speak, for her. It's like, what? I'm much more so with the Sergeant, a portrait of the women he paints. As much as they may be a little bit on the voguey side, there's still this sense of their presence and their, that sort of stuff, and Sargent's presence with them in the room, that sort of thing. Can I do that? But I want to just leave you with a quote here. I think it might be the last thing I have for you. But it's from C.S. Lewis. And so the difference between the heart part, and can we get that to keep its place, or is the head just going to get bigger and bigger until the heart doesn't even exist anymore? Is there relevancy, or rather? Highly recommend, by the way, the reading of The Great Divorce. But this is from an essay by C.S. Lewis. I think it's called Men Without Chests. But he said, their heads are no bigger than the ordinary. It's the atrophy of the chest beneath that makes them seem so. And so I would just say that these are all random thoughts, but it's just my one sense of this whole thing is, are we going to experience a loss like that? Are you guys who want to go into this just to get your results, have your, make your posters and all those sorts of things, are you going to wind up in that world that I would simply say is more or less and you might say wonderful, but more or less the Rubens world, and get product, it's like getting, doing comic books and stuff like that, getting a formalizing everything and getting a product after a product after a product after a product that you can pour into a computer and have it come out for you, if that's truly the way it works. Or is there something about that one-off thing that the search through every single image, efficiencies are all about production, right, in that one sense, but is production more important than quality? And these days when you can reproduce a Rembrandt, you can't get all of it. You go to see the painting in person, you get a whole lot more than you do from a reproduction. And there are numbers of these reproductions of the philosopher with light in these various caverns, which this one looks so much like the human skull. It's just very impressive. I've had dreams like this, and I know I was looking out of my own mind through these openings, these left and right, those are the openings of the eyes. This individual search for every single picture, and the individual, the individual, being the participant, being the source and the searcher, and ultimately the unsuccessful but struggling communicator. So it's just like it puts us in that class. We're all working to be very, very good. And that's all the mechanics and all that sort of stuff. And yet, is there something that the more that becomes the thing? Like I tell students all the time, you have to listen to what's in front of you. Don't try to just simply apply a 1, 2, 3 and everything comes out okay, right? You probably heard me say that. But in some sense, I feel like that's what the sort of one of those dangers that goes with the AI territory. But that's only in the limited way I know it. So don't take any of this to be anything more than a conversation that maybe what you'd call an initial sally that might open up an even bigger conversation, a better one, that might be informative to all, maybe to find even significant uses for technologies, since we obviously are using things like brushes and canvas and improving on those sorts of things all the time. Is there something else that can be available to us? So I think I've said all I can do of any use to you today. And so again, I thank you, Sergio E., and for that nice contribution today. and all of you for hanging in there. Keep on subscribing. Keep on sharing, please. Love to keep these numbers up. Keep a little bit of dollars coming in through YouTube and Rumble or whatever, however that works. And again, we are looking to do something around Christmas, so I haven't talked to Mr. Producer recently, so I can't tell you anything for sure about all that sort of stuff. We're also talking seriously about the workshop in London or environs, for next year. So as much as any of you guys are interested in doing those things, be in touch. I am planning to do whatever workshop we do. I always incorporate a composition workshop as part of the, sort of the basic Boston School sort of education I try to share, information I try to share. So, all right. So thank you all. Do keep on sharing and liking and all those things, and do keep on donating as much as you can. It's certainly needed. So, all right. Take care and thank you. And Merry Christmas if for those of you who don't see me again this year. All right. Next time.